Good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Burr. I'm the Washington correspondent for the Salt Lake Tribune and the 109th president of the National Press Club. I'm honored to welcome you here today and stress the vital role that journalists play in the world to educate our readers, our listeners, and our viewers about the truth. Now, sometimes that truth is not something that is welcomed in all corners of the world. And that's why it's important to speak on behalf of our colleagues like John Dündar, who has the courage to investigate and report allegations of Turkey shipping arms to Syria. His reporting should have earned him awards. Instead, it earned him an aggravated life sentence. Journalists should not face penalties, prison, or even death for doing the work that is so important to a free people. Journalism is not a crime. The National Press Club welcomes Dilek Dündar, Dana Priest, Tolgar Tanis, and a special thanks to Delphine Hogland, the U.S. Director of Reporters Without Borders, for calling attention to John's sentence. We look forward to a great discussion, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Tommy, for opening this discussion and for your support on behalf of the Press Club for Chan and for all the journalists in Turkey. My name is Delphine Algan, and I'm the U.S. Director of Reporters Without Borders. As you know, Reporters Without Borders is the largest press freedom organization in the world, thanks to a network of 150 correspondents working in 130 countries. We're able to investigate, advocate, and assist journalists all around the world. Today, to discuss Turkey's crackdown on journalists, I'm really honored to be joined by such prominent panelists. First, Dilek Dündar, the wife of Can Dündar, Tolga Tanis, who just stepped down but will be there with the Orient correspondent in Washington. Tolga Tanis, the Orient correspondent in Washington, Dana Priest, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist for the Washington Post, and James Prize, and thank you, James, you're also a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, but for the New York Times. And really thank you all for being here today. You can find, of course, their bios on the handout. Actually, another prominent American journalist wanted to participate today in this discussion and wanted to express his support with Can Dündar. Carl Bernstein. As you all know, Carl Bernstein shared the Pulitzer Prize in 1973 with Bob Woodward for his coverage of the Watergate for the Washington Post. Who else could better incarnate the need for journalism to hold government accountable? So we have a video message from Carl Bernstein.
I'm Carl Bernstein. The world, and especially the Turkish people, need to understand the travesty and repression of press freedom that is occurring in Turkey today under President Erdogan. He has instituted a methodical crackdown on the media, using the smokescreen of terrorism to justify the arrest and detention of numerous distinguished journalists whose only crimes have been the pursuit of the truth. This is especially true of Can Dündar and Erdem Gül, who are charged with spying and terrorism because they revealed evidence of arms deliveries by the Turkish intelligence services to Islamist groups in Syria. Erdogan has made the absurd claim that his country's media is the freest in the world. But as Freedom House has noted in a report, Erdogan's government enacted draconian laws that expand both the state's power to block websites and increase surveillance capability of the national intelligence services. Journalists faced unprecedented legal obstacles as the Turkish courts restrict reporting on corruption and national security issues. The authorities there continue to aggressively use the penal code, criminal defamation laws, and the anti-terrorism law to crack down on journalists and media outlets. Verbal attacks on journalists by senior politicians have often been followed by harassment and even death threats against the targeted journalists on social media. Turkey's people and the world need to know what has become of freedom of the press in Erdogan's Turkey, and they need to demand the immediate release of Can Dündar and Erdem Gül, because a country that once pursued democratic ideals is being enveloped in darkness by this assault on the media. There can be no real freedom without a free press and free expression, both of which are disappearing in Turkey today. Thank you for listening to this.
So So freedom of information is under attack in Turkey. Turkey is ranked 149th out of 180 countries in the 2015 Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index. Journalists are arrested almost every day. Turkey is one of the 5 biggest prisons for journalists in the world. Dozens of journalists are placed under investigation for terrorist propaganda or insulting the president. The 2 most common charges, terrorist propaganda or insulting the president. Media headquarters are stormed by the police. Opposition newspapers and TV stations are shut down. Hundreds of journalists have been fired. The growing concentration of media ownership in the hands of government allies has eroded pluralism and encouraged self-censorship. The authorities have also reined in the internet. Following draconian reforms, the blocking of websites has become systematic. Turkey is responsible for more than 2/3 of the requests to Twitter to remove content. The government does not hesitate to block the entire YouTube platform. These practices compound problems inherited from the years of the military rule, laws restricting freedom of expression, a judicial culture centered on defense of the states, and impunity for police violence. The Syrian conflict, the refugees crisis, and the resumption of fighting with Kurdish rebels have accentuated governmental paranoia about critical journalists. Far from diffusing political and communal tension, the accelerating censorship and aggressive government rhetoric have sharpened it. Reopening the space for democratic debate is essential for stabilizing the country. Freedom of information is part of the solution. We can only hope that Turkey's people will pull together and work in unison for security and peace. I will now turn to our panelists for this discussion, and we will, of course, let time for questions from the audience afterwards. So first, I will, of course, start with you, Dilek. Thank you again so much for being here. Your husband is one of the most prominent journalists in Turkey. He's the editor-in-chief of the independent newspaper Cumhuriyet. And actually, Cumhuriyet was awarded Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Award last November. But 1 week later, Can was imprisoned. He was placed in pre-trial detention with his Ankara bureau chief, Erdem Gül, on charges of membership of a terrorist organization, espionage, and divulging state secrets. Because of an article that Cumhuriyet published last May about allegation that Turkey's national intelligence organization has been delivering arms to rebels in Syria. The newspapers produced a video and photos to support this investigation. Your husband and Erdem Gül are now facing possible life sentence, and the trial should start on March 25th. So I guess the first question that everybody asks you all the time is, how is your husband doing? How can you see him or talk to him? How is he doing?
Okay. He's nice. He's full of spirit because he believes that he did nothing wrong. He's right. And it's right to publish that article because people have to learn what's going on. So he gives hope to everyone, even though when we go to talk with him, we were saying that Turkey that these are all things happen in Turkey, and we are very sad about that. He said, "Don't worry, we will fight and we will bring democracy to Turkey again." So he's high in spirit. Believes in his case. The trial will be held, as Delphine said, that in 25th of May. March. Sorry. And the Constitutional Courts will look after the case tomorrow. It's a new news that came from Turkey this morning to me. And we can see him in Turkey once a week, 1 hour, behind the glasses and by phone. And we can only once a month can meet him face to face. He has got no right to use computers, no typewriting. He just writes in handwriting. And there is permission to talk on the phone 10 minutes, only the home phone, once a week. And the Ministry of Justice are not giving any permission to the civil society visit. The only ones who can visit him is the lawyers and the MPs of the opposition party. They are not giving any permission to the Kurdish party too. So 2 times in a week they can do some sports, but they cannot see anyone in the prison except Erdem and Can are all together.
They're in the same cell.
In the same cell, and
Can and Erdem are in the same cell.
They are playing the football together. And in that prison, there's the other Fethullah Gülen's movements, political prisoners, and the Kurdish political prisoners, but they don't see each other.
How's his health?
His health is good. The meals are not very nice, they said. Sorry. Sorry, I'm very sorry.
You're busy. Everybody will have to talk to you. So his health is okay?
His health is okay. He's doing some sport and just trying to make their meals. So that's his life. He's writing a lot and he's reading books. He wrote to the various newspapers, international newspapers, and now he's writing a book inside.
Can they cook their own meal? Or?
No, they cannot. They can only buy from a canteen of the prison. But it's just a cheese sandwich or something like that.
And is he aware of the support from the outside? Does that help at all?
Yes, he is aware of that, and he's very happy because of that. And he's happy from the Hope Watch in front of the prison. There is a Hope Watch that the journalists and civil society is going and waiting there. And they're saying that we are here for Can and Erdem. So it's a nice feeling when you're inside that somebody is caring for you. And in international media and international world has come to know this fact very much, and they are they are on the subject very highly. So it's a good thing.
It's maybe hard for you to answer in all modesty, but why is your husband's case so important for Turkey?
I believe and I think that Can was a very popular journalist in Turkey, and the government wants to give a fear to the people, fear to the journalists, that even though I can take Can, I can take you all. So it was a fear that's been put on the journalists of Turkey.
We'll go back, of course, to Can's situation later, but I want to thank Tolga for being here as well. You are the Washington, D.C. correspondent for another major Turkish newspaper, Hürriyet, and you also have been under investigation for allegedly insulting President Erdogan, as I say, a very common charge these days, because of your book that you published last March, POTUS and the Gentleman, and in your book you examined the relation between Washington and Ankara. So what was this investigation all about, and where does it stand now?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Actually, I'm not sure if I should thank to you, because it's each time that I come here, the situation in Turkey is worsening, and I'm saying the same things, and I don't know how long I will keep saying this same things, and it's very sad. It's very unfortunate, I think, and it is an honor for me actually to be here to support Can Dündar's case, because I have a personal story with Can in terms of the case that you mentioned before. I wrote a book, as you said, in last year, and it was published in March. it was focusing on the relationship between U.S. and Turkey, but at the same time, the book was including a story, an investigative story about a corruption case. And in this corruption story, there were some allegedly ties between Erdogan's family and Barzani family on a secret deal made for the oil trade between Turkey and Iraq. And after this book, he sued me. The book was published in March, and he complained me, and then I learned that also his son-in-law also complained on me, the guy who is the energy minister right now, and that time he was only the son-in-law, but he's the member of parliament, and also he's the energy minister, etc. And this secret business was allegedly run by his son-in-law, according to the documents that I presented in my book. And then he and his son-in-law sued me. But more important than this, I wrote the book, and the publisher and me sent the copy of the book in advance to some media outlets in Turkey. I had no idea about what will be the reaction to the book, what will be the audience will respond to the book and to the allegations that I'm raising in my book, etc. But there's a time difference between US and Turkey, 7 hours, and you don't know sometimes what's going on in Turkey when you wake up and your email, your inbox is full, your accounts are full with the messages, etc. And it happened to me because when I woke up on a Friday morning, I remember very well, just before the release of the book, just before of the sales of the book will start in the bookstores, Cumhuriyet made the headline story in my book. Mm-hmm. And even one day before I was exchanging emails with John, he didn't say anything to me. And suddenly I woke up and he was using my story as a headline story, and it shaped all. I mean, the Turkish audience was very, interesting story, and they found interesting, and everyone was discussing this story on the front page story of Cumhuriyet, even though I'm the representative of Hürriyet. You can imagine how it was problematic for me.
A big article on your book, and they said it.
So this example is showing how he's brave, how he's courageous, how his journalistic instincts are strong, and he's not hesitating to do his job when he sees something, when he's smelling something real. So, like every journalist, real journalist doing all around the world. And then he sued me. And his son-in-law sued me, Erdogan. And he sued both of us, actually, John and me, etc. And there was a court, investigation started by the prosecutor. Prosecutor informed us about the investigation, and we replied to the allegations, etc. And then they dropped the charges. It's another story. I can explain why they dropped in a whole session, but it's not. The important in this panel, I think. But what I'm trying to say, when you do your job in Turkey as a journalist, you end up in a jail. So that's the bottom line. They are using the court processes to intimidate the journalists, or to give fear to other colleagues. If you do something, if you oppose to the government's policies, if you question the policies of the government, at some point the government and the officials are using the judicial system as a threat against you. And how impartial the judicial system in Turkey is another a big question mark, because this case also, Can Dündar's case, started in May. And it started with the statement of the president, not with the prosecution's action. Because when they published that story, Mr. Erdogan went on TV and he said that he will pay for this. Mm-hmm. It was just before the June election. And during the TV interview, he said that he will pay for this. And John ended up in a jail at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But how the judicial system is politicized, to show how it is politicized, it's an example. He waited until the November election that he won. he said that before the June election that the AKP couldn't get the majority. He couldn't do anything after the June until the November. But once the AKP won against the majority at November 1st, and then in November 26th, Can was arrested. So just this example also only by himself, it's showing that how judicial system is politicized in Turkey, and it's used by the politicians and the officials to intimidate the journalists.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this illustration, and unfortunately we will go back to why the crackdown is getting worse and worse in Turkey, but I would like to go now to Dana. Thank you again for being here. We have only prominent journalists here, but you are definitely one of the most prominent investigative reporter at the Post. You spend the majority of your career focusing on national security, military operation, and you won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. And one in 2006 for revealing secret CIA prison in Eastern Europe, something that certainly the U.S. government didn't want so much published. And now with your journalist student at University of Maryland, you decided to focus on the plight of journalist jail around the world. Why was it a priority for you to focus on jail journalists, and what did you learn while working on this? What does it tell you about the situation in Turkey?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. I'm really honored to be with you, and Tongas, you too, and Jim. Absolutely. So I chose to focus on this because when I took my head out of my own world for a minute and looked around the world and found the plight of journalists around the world was a story of huge magnitude that the American press, and myself included, are pretty much ignoring. And so that's really what I wanted to address a little bit today, to speak to my colleagues, the American colleagues who have been so supportive of Jason Rezaian and really did help put pressure on the U.S. government to put pressure to maintain that case as a high-profile case, and we've seen the result of that. But we are not doing a good job in other countries. And most prominently right now in Turkey, we see the administration talking a little bit more because the situation is getting more dire. I mean, Turkey's standing sort of at the door of a very exclusive club that would include Egypt and Russia, both countries that at one time, for a moment, had somewhat independent media and have slid back so far. And Turkey is really about to join those two members. So what I found when I looked around was the case of Turkey really is symbolic of what's happening in so many other countries bordering Turkey, but also on every continent. And we just aren't paying attention to this. And particularly this case with Can, when you look at the charges, they're disclosing classified information and espionage. Now, what have we gone through here in the United States in the last 10 years? Targeting journalists for disclosing classified information and accusing us of espionage, sometimes actually in those charges. So when I looked at this case, you know, I think of him as the Jim Risen of Turkey. Jim was someone who was targeted by the U.S. government and suffered through a decade of, pressure, of name calling. He got support from his U.S. colleagues that I hope did finally matter in pressuring the Justice Department to drop that case. So the least we can do is the same for our colleagues in Turkey who just tomorrow the Constitutional Court has a chance to say, let's at least do the right thing and let him out on bond or on bail until the trial happens. So we just need to elevate. What happens overseas to journalists affects us here. Our ability to tell the truth is really dependent on our colleagues' ability to tell the truth because we are all linked, and what we do depends on them. So get over your hesitancy to be an advocate, because if you can't be an advocate for truth in journalism, then I'm not sure what you can be an advocate for. So thank you for having me.
So, Jim, it's actually not the first time that I heard someone doing the comparison between you and Chan. I don't know if you were aware of this. But because you have been covering national security since 1998 for the New York Times, and you won also a Pulitzer Prize. It's the Pulitzer Prize table. In 2006 for your reporting on the warrantless wiretapping program of President George Bush. So you know very well, maybe too well, the personal risks for a reporter to investigate and publish information that the government would prefer not to be known by the public. So I want to ask you, in a sense, you know so well why journalists have to be the watchdogs for democracy. So how do you feel about this situation in Turkey and with Chan?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor, and thanks to Dana for the very kind remarks, and to you too. I just want to echo first everything that Carl Bernstein said, and that Dana has said, and everyone here has said about how outrageous this is. And that we really have to put pressure on the Turkish government to begin to end this ridiculous crackdown on journalism. I would like to say that while the United States government has done some, I understand, in this case, that you've got to remember Turkey is a member of NATO, and so it's an important American ally, and it relies heavily on the United States for arms and for economic aid and for its standing in the world. And that if we, as Dana said, if we want to send a message to the world that the crackdown on journalists and whistleblowers in the United States should not be something that is copied all around the world, and that we want to show that we're not going to continue to be a negative role model on journalism in the world, then the United States government has to step up and be more vocal in support of journalists in Turkey. And I think that the Obama administration owes it to the world to begin to speak out much more forcefully than it has and put greater pressure on Turkey. If you can't pressure a NATO ally, then I don't know what country you can pressure. And I think that to me is really important. This has got to become a top priority for American-Turkish relations.
Thank you, Jim. And on this note, Dilek, why was it so important for you to come in Washington to raise awareness about Chan's situation and the situation of journalists in Turkey?
The thing is that, just like them, I thought that being an alliance mustn't and doesn't have to be only in military alliance. It must be on democratic means, because when a country loses its democratic means, then it goes to an age and the countries collapse. And so the America will have to work on it more and more and more, and the world have to work on it. So I came to America just to make them to realize that we are alliance in democracy, not just only in military aspects. That's why, and they gave me a lot of support.
And Olga, sorry, I don't know. I tried to make a portrait of the situation in Turkey, and as you said, we repeated so much what is going on in Turkey. 2 years ago, 1 year ago, we were discussing this crackdown, always saying it's getting worse, and it's again getting worse after the second election in November. How worse could that be? What is the future of journalism in Turkey? Can you describe briefly, maybe for the people who don't know, how is the situation for media in Turkey right now?
Yeah, the situation is worsening, as you said, and as a correspondent who is working in Washington, I cannot talk too much about my what my colleagues in Ankara especially are experiencing, because they are under huge pressure from the government officials, especially when they are trying to their regular job, because they are not only, as far as I know, they are not only pressing him to not criticize the government, but sometimes I know that they are threatening them to not to give access, for example. This is not a kind of censorship, but it is a new way to intimidate the journalists. If you don't have an access to your job, if you don't go to press briefings, or if you don't allow to follow the officials' visits, etc., at some point your editors, your managers will start to question your job. I mean, how you didn't write on this, how you could you missed this, etc. So it's kind of a new censorship way, let's say. If you not behave as the government wants, so you, at the end of the day, you can lose your accesses and your job. So the situation is not only the pressure is not only coming from the judicial systems or the accusations or court cases, etc., but they are finding new ways, new means.
Always new ways, more vicious
yes,
pressure.
Exactly. They don't talk to you, for example. You know, you need to talk to them, but they don't talk to you, and you're losing your sources. I don't know. I mean, James is right, actually. I mean, I agree with him. If the international community uses his leverage on Turkey to use this to change it, at least at some. I mean, I don't expect at some point we will wake up and the democracy will come, with the press freedom will come to Turkey. But at least inch by inch, European Union, US, every international community members can use their leverage on Turkey, specifically on this issue, I think, on press freedom issue. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the case of Can Dündar, he's in jail for questioning the support of Turkey to jihadist groups in Syria. Mm-hmm. So, which is exactly what is fitting with the national security concerns of the European community or the US, etc. So if the journalists are not allowed to cover this kind of stories, it will hurt the international community as well. Mm-hmm. So it's not about only the strategic thinking, strategic partnership with Turkey, but once you support the press freedom, you supporting your own national security as well, I think, in terms of this kind of threat. So I totally agree with Jim, and what the U.S. especially should do to use their leverage on Turkey.
Can I ask you a question about EU pressure? I mean, have you, or the European Court of Human Rights, or anyone, have you seen any movement there that's positive or creative or?
Yeah, I mean, not maybe in an action, but in my case, for example, they dropped the charges against me, thinking of the European Human Rights Court, maybe. I don't know, I assume that once the European Human Rights Court is there, it's at least an assurance for Turkey, for Turkish citizens, for the liberties in Turkey, freedoms in Turkey. So it's good to know that they are there. But what they are doing, it's another question, because European Union right now is busy with the refugee problem, and they have to work with Turkey. So it's the hypocrisy of politics, let's say.
Another thing I just wanted to add that what he was just talking about, the importance of this story in particular, if you think about it from an American standpoint, the idea that Turkey and the Turkish government is supporting jihadists in the Middle East with arms is something that American readers should know about. This is an important story for the United States in the middle of a presidential campaign where we're trying to decide the future direction of American policy in the Middle East. And if one of the most important countries that we are relying on in this supposed war on terror is actually supporting secretly terrorist groups and Islamic groups, that is an important story that has a public service in the United States. And so this directly affects American readers and American journalism and our own understanding of what's going on, which is so badly skewed by so much misinformation out there. And so I think the Americans should think about this in a very personal way, about the importance of this kind of reporting. You can't just rely, American reporters often rely on foreign journalists for information about what's really going on. So,
He's writing from the ground. He's a law
Yeah.
journalist, you know.
Very, very good points. And maybe I can only agree with you that definitely European allies, American allies have a role to play, but we know that press freedom and freedom comes from the people of their own countries first. So it's my understanding that Can received a lot of support from the Turkish people. There have been so much marches, protests, these hope cards, and we can only hope that the Turkish people can pull together to work for peace and security. So do you think that this fight inch by inch for more freedom can come from the Turkish people themselves? How would that happen?
Oh, I can't say hope so, because people are so tired of marching and marching and marching, and nothing is changing in Turkey. So they need some support, I think, some hope. And in Can's case, there is hope, and Can is giving everyone hope that there can be we can win sometime. We have to try. So people are so pleased to see Can's high spirit, and I hope that they will try to fight again and again.
Can you talk a minute about, you said that you met with some U.S. officials,
Yes.
and that they gave you support, but
Yes.
can you be more specific about what they intend? I mean, did they give you more than support? Some promises that they would elevate this in any way?
No, they said that they know the situation very well, and they are on it, and they are in front of in their talkings with the Turkish government. They are keeping saying that the journalism will be free in Turkey, and they hope that they will listen to their words.
Mm-hmm. But no proposals that they would actually
No, they
withhold some aid or
No, they didn't
arms?
say that.
Mhm.
Hopefully not yet necessary. We can now open maybe for questions from the audience, if there are any questions. Yeah.
A couple of questions. I'm originally from Azerbaijan, and when it comes to working on the crackdown, we recently started taking our Turkish colleagues and welcome to the club.
Yeah.
We also have the same problems in Azerbaijan. But let me ask you about two questions. One, you mentioned cult of personality that Erdogan is trying to build around himself, and we have some hard time with explaining our American colleagues that in Turkey you can get to prison just for writing something against the president. How is it possible? Like John is asking here that you writing something against the president and then you're being in prison for us. Is this cult of personality something new for Turkish reality, or what is Erdogan trying to do by let's say fighting back against?
The press freedom problem didn't start with Erdogan. First of all, to be honest,
Yes.
It has been a long story for the Turkish press. And before, for example, John has a political history. The political past, and he's leftist, and he suffered during the coup d'état in the 80s, etc. But as a journalist, John's identity was not under this kind of pressure before Erdogan's government, but Erdogan started to include John and the other journalists like John in his tenure as well. That's the difference. Before, for example, Kurdish journalists were suffering a lot. They were, we were still champion of this shameful ranking in the world for a number of journalists who are in jail. But the difference with Erdogan, he started to use some judicial processes to protect himself, to abuse the system to protect himself, and to charge the journalists who are critical of himself. Before the regime was Kemalist, was secular, and there wasn't any problem with the secular journalists or some journalists who are not interested with that kind of controversial issues like Kurdish issues, etc. What we are witnessing now, there is a specific law in Turkish code which is protecting the president against insult and libel, and he's abusing this specific code to punish the journalists. So that's the difference of Erdogan with this predecessors. Of course, he's not saying that, okay, put him in a jail, but he's ordering to the prosecutors. Like John's case, John published a story in May. In the very same month, he gave an interview on the TV, and he said that he will pay. And 4 months later, John was in the jail. So that's how he's working.
You said you had a
second question was about leverages I'm going to talk about. I just want to follow up this kind of question. And, is there anything else that we could, come up with, rather than just naming and shaming, to use against, against Turkish government to bring them back to, to at least use against them as leverage and pressure on media freedom. Anything else that you could offer? For instance, like right now, the global oil price declined. So is the Turkish government asking for economic support from the U.S. or anything else that they ask from us that we can use it as leverage?
I don't know.
But what is...
I was just going to say, I think that what you really want to do is pressure the Obama administration, not the Turks. The pressure should be applied to the Obama administration to shame them into actually doing more for press freedom around the world, and particularly with major countries like Turkey that are supposed American allies. I think that's where the pressure point should be, and you get them to move and actually do things. They then can decide which pressure points to use, but it's only if the Obama administration is shamed into actually recognizing that their actions over the last 10 years, or since they came into office, and the Bush administration's actions have sent a message around the world that press freedom doesn't matter, that they have to change that position, change that image around the world, that they have been a role model for press crackdowns instead of for press freedom. That's the way to start changing the discussion in Washington and around the world, I think.
I just want to add that actually, unfortunately, for 4 years that I'm the U.S. Director of Reporters Without Borders, we have seen that in the past, dozens of journalists were jailed in Turkey. And most of them, dozens of them, have been released, but with charges still pending. And I really believe that it's because the international pressure worked. Really, I'm sure that President Erdogan didn't like to have the sticker worst jailer of journalists on his head. And I really believe that it worked in the past. Now I'm really concerned because it seemed that the crackdown really become more and more subtle and vicious and kind of shameless. And now they're targeting the most prominent journalists, as Chan. So I just, based on the experience, the pressure worked. So maybe the level of pressure should be higher. And if the situation doesn't improve, then we should maybe start talking about economic pressure or things like that. But hopefully, again, the Turkey is also facing a very difficult situation with the refugee crisis, the role of the war in Syria, but nothing can happen for the best without a democratic Turkey. Yes.
Hi, this question is for Ms. Dilek. We know that it was said that the Turkish government was targeting Dündar for some time. Do you know what kinds of pressure and intimidation he was facing before his arrest, when they were kind of after him and his journalism?
First, the Turkish newspapers are divided to two. One, a large majority is now belongs to Erdogan's allies, and that newspapers just print a lot of columns about Can. And in some televisions, some journalists just give an example of a CIA, and they said that in America, that kind of journalists are being killed in traffic accidents by CIA.
Glad to see you're alive.
So we are so much afraid of his life in Turkey. And there was a bomb alarmed in the Cumhuriyet newspaper, and the police surrounded for 1 week or so.
So the newspaper's offices
Yes,
was targeted.
Yes, was targeted. And so...
Have they tried to shut down publication?
no, they didn't.
Uh-huh.
No,
But
didn't.
they sent investigators from the finance ministry.
After John's arrest, also the financial ministry sent his investors, investigators to the newspaper for the financial reports, because Cumhuriyet is not has got no owner. It's a foundation. That's why it's a more or less free newspaper. So they want to control this with the financial...
So did he ever think of leaving Turkey for a while
Yes,
things cooled
yes.
off? Yeah.
Just 10 days ago, before his arrest, we were in Strasbourg for the RSF award. They said to John that don't go back to Turkey and stay in Europe because they will arrest you. But he decided he said that if I run away, they will quickly say to me, you see, he's a spy, so he ran away for Europe. But if I stay and put on jail, he said, Erdogan will have to work on me. And he will have to face a lot of difficulties, so let's try this.
That's really, really courageous. And so in a sense, Chan was under judicial pressure for a long time on many other cases.
Yes.
Also, Cumhuriyet was the only Turkish newspaper who published Charlie Hebdo cartoons that brought some attention already. And so the office were attacked and so, there's been a lot of pressure for some time, and he kind of knew he would be arrested.
So it strikes me that one of the things that reporters in the United States and elsewhere might want to consider is what happened when, in Azerbaijan, the president jailed the leading investigative reporter who was looking at his holdings. And a group of journalists that were funded, a group of American journalists have basically taken her investigations and continued to do them because they're free to do that. And so, I mean, the story that he has been so troubled, the story that they used against him to put him in jail is such an important American story, which is, again, the shipment of arms to Syria. That story, deserves follow-up by those of us who can do that. It's a critical story.
Yeah, just to give an example, I mean, you are mentioning probably Hatice, the Azerbaijan.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the part of this network, actually. I'm one of them who followed her story. It's not only American journalists. We are the journalists all around the region, in Balkans, in the Caucasian countries, everywhere. And we established a network. And when they put Hatice in jail, we cooperated over the internet months on months, and we created a new story, a follow-up story, what Hatice started.
Which is
not only
we
Americans,
can do on
every
this
journalist
too.
in the area, joined this joint effort.
That's definitely the best idea ever, because if there's one thing that the Turkish government wanted was to silence Chan's voice and this story. So the best answer would be if journalists all around the world could continue this investigation and give it even more publicity that it would have ever have if Chan was not in jail. So let's work on that then.
And just to give you a little bit more on this, we're speaking about Khadija Ismailova, who's in prison in Azerbaijan, and it's an organization called the OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and they formed an international consortium of reporters all over the world who could help follow up her reporting, which is basically reporting on the ill-gotten gains, let's say, of Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, and his family. And they've done some amazing reporting. You can find it on that website.
Yes.
So,
I'm Mehmet Yüksel from HTP. I welcome Dilek here, and especially it saddens that Can Dündar is arrested. But unfortunately, we are seeing an escalation in this situation against the journalists. The things which Kurdish journalist was living 5-10 years ago, being arrested, is switching a more dangerous level now. Today, we identify a journalist. Ruhat Aktaş has been identified that he has been burned lively by the security forces in Cizre. It's escalating, and yesterday they shot against the journalist in Diyarbakir. So the situation is changing worse. Don't you think that it should be a position more stronger from the United States, because it's going this way? That means tomorrow we will have worst case also in the west of Turkey, connected to the civil war, which is going
I think,
on in Turkey.
yeah, we definitely all agree that the situation cannot go worse forever like that. And even if the United States is doing quite some, it seems that it's not enough yet. So the level of pressure domestically and internationally will be enough when we will see that this kind of crimes stop. So yes, the US, the European Union, the journalist community should do more until this escalation stops. Yeah.
I'm Lucy Soyan from Easily Relief Fund. I have a question. Despite all human rights violation and intimidation of freedom of speech, how far do you think President Erdogan is willing to go and or resist? And do you see any light in a dark tunnel?
We have to see. Because if we can't see, there is no life in Turkey then. And Erdogan I think, will push the situation until that he will become elected as a president. But we have to fight against them, and we have to fight for the freedom.
I think Can is the light in the tunnel. And all the Turkish journalists who continue to investigate facing such risk are definitely the light. The Turkish people are the light at the end of the tunnel. And definitely Erdogan will do anything he can to continue on his crusade. But there's light, I believe. And we have to help them to put more light in the tunnel. Any other questions? If so, maybe we can just let you finish by maybe a final statement. So tomorrow the Constitutional Court will hopefully decide, and we have a lot of hope that they could decide on Can's release.
When we believe in light, we have to believe in something else too. So we are believing the Constitutional Court at the end. The jurisdiction system have to control itself and have to change get rid of all the political powers. And in Turkey, the Constitutional Court seems to be the highest court, and not very much impressed by the politics. Hope so. So tomorrow they will look after the case and will decide on freedom, I believe, I hope. So we need all your support here in America, and we can give our support from Turkey if you want. And together we will, I think, overcome this freedom of speech all around the world.
So thank you all for coming, and of course Dilek and the panelists are available for a few questions if you want. Thank you. Thank you. Great comment.
Good to see you.
So you're going to be here.